which was a joint stock company. Likewise, the king didn't create the state of Virginia. Do you know what the king created? The Virginia Company. These were almost all for-profit corporations. So I will now create the Massachusetts Bay Trading Colony, and in the charter that creates Massachusetts, I will use the following words. I claim ultimate authority over this land. However, I will not do the day-to-day governing. Instead, I will appoint a royal governor, quote, to plant, to rule, and govern in my name, under my authority, and for the benefit and profit of the shareholders. So, in the creation of Massachusetts and Virginia and most of the other corporations, the royal governor who was appointed, there's another word that we might think of today for Dennis. CEO. Chris, that's exactly right. I'm submitting to you that in a very real way, the way that the United States of America began was actually as a series of corporations under the auspices of the king, who claimed the divine right to rule and the authority to govern, and the governors that we think of as the royal governors were really CEOs. And so, I submit this. The American revolutionaries were not merely calling for a more socially responsible king. And so today, perhaps we might call for something more than merely socially responsible corporations. Maybe we should raise our aspirations a little higher. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of feeling like what I mostly do as an engaged citizen is to beg corporations, please, can we convince you to stop spewing so much poison into the air that you give children asthma who live all around it. Oh, please, corporations, would you maybe consider how you are poisoning the children around you with what you're putting into the water? Oh, please, corporations, would you not kill quite so many miners in West Virginia through your operation? Oh, please, corporation, would you not destroy the entire friggin' ecosystem of the Gulf of Mexico? I mean, for God's sakes, can't we raise our aspirations a little higher? Is that really all we want? A fewer, less deaths? No, that's not the world we want to live in. So maybe we should take a page from the American revolutionaries and dare to imagine what we really want and dare to imagine what it would actually look like. Because let me tell you something, folks. That exercise is power. Even deeper to me, that exercise, whatever those people went through, is discovering self-respect. The ability to actually think that they could challenge the cultural divine right of kings, to think that they could challenge what they had been told how society was supposed to operate, to dare to imagine that they would recreate society. That is something powerful. That is something that I think today we ought to make a pledge that we will strive and aspire to do ourselves. That's what we ought to be about. And so, since we know that the American Revolution threw out the king and a new document or a new form of government is going to be put in its place, we know that that's the way it worked and the way that it happened, then I'll now ask, what document gets created in order to describe the new government and how we'll operate? That document, by the way, we are taught as lawyers is the supreme law of the land. It's our government. What's that document called? The U.S. Constitution. And how many people here have read the U.S. Constitution in the last year? Okay, all right, good. A couple of hands go up. I'm going to ask those of you who feel like you are familiar to please grade my papers. Make sure I get this more or less right, okay? Because I'm going to submit this, that the Constitution, when you actually read it, the way it's supposed to operate, there are basically two big actors or principles, P-A-L-S, that are at stake, or at play. The first actor is the most important one. In fact, it's the first three words of that document. We the people. All I ever have to do when I'm doing this presentation is put my hand to my ear, and people will repeat those words. And I'm glad about that, because the phrase we the people are hallowed in this country, and they should be. And that's because we the people come together in order to create the second actor, which is government. And that's because within this framework, we the people are free and we are sovereign. And what does the word sovereign mean again? The authority to rule. We are claiming that we have the authority to rule. Government is not sovereign. Government, in fact, is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? The people. I like how that goes. It's got a ring to it. We the people are free and sovereign because we the people are described as having rights. Government does not have rights over we the people. In fact, to the contrary, government has duties. And in fact, the difference between rights and duties is, at some respects, the very core of the entire idea of the law in the Western tradition. You see, if I have the right to do something, it means I can do it, and I can do it without anybody's permission. I don't need permission. That's what it means to have a right, that you can assert it and do it under law. Likewise, if I have a duty, or if government has a duty, it means it has to be done even if you don't want to do it. Now, where might these duties come from? Well, remember, another way to think about this is all power resides with the people. And that, by the way, power to the people is not just a Black Panther Party chant, or it was. It was also an American Revolutionary chant. I think it's an important concept. In fact, I think it's not only so important, I love it. In fact, watch this. Power to the people. I'm going to ask you to repeat that with me. Power to the people. Say it like you mean it, if you mean it. Power to the people. And how did that feel? Good. Good. Just to say it out loud. We don't even say it anymore. You know, the American Revolutionaries said it, they believed it. And frankly, the Black Panthers said it and believed it. And whenever you start to act like you've got power, if you think you've got power, if you act like you've got power, you've got power. That's kind of important, y'all. Seriously, it is such an important concept. All power resides with the people. And by the way, I could give this same presentation to a Tea Party group, and if they haven't done an internet search engine on who I am yet, they'll be applauding me. All power resides with the people, but we the people delegate a certain amount of our power to government. How much power do we delegate to government? Only enough to perform the duties that we have already collectively thought that they should do. You see, I look at this and I think, wow, this is brilliant, because it understands that in my individual capacity, I have absolute rights. But there is also a collective idea. There's not just the private sphere, there's the public sphere. You see, this concept satisfies my own principles of civil libertarianism, this kind of don't tread on me, I can say what I want, I can think what I want, I can organize how I want, I can petition the government, I can be free from unreasonable search and seizure. You know, all of those constitutional amendments under the Bill of Rights and the amendments that followed the 14th Amendment of equal protection of the law, all of those rights are individual rights. I will suggest to you that those are human rights. And to demonstrate that, don't be alarmed. For those of you in the back, I don't know if y'all can see, but I'm pointing at, somebody up close? My belly button. I invite all of you, if you're too shy to check now, go home, check and see if you have a belly button. If you do, you have human rights. And those rights, your human rights, are actually supposed to be protected. And in fact, and here's the kicker, governmental action about how the society ought to operate, we're supposed to collectively make public decisions, but those public decisions are never able to interfere, infringe upon your actual individual human rights. In fact, the Constitution does not create rights. The Constitution recognizes rights. These are natural law rights, is another way to talk about it. Natural human rights that we have, they're inherent, they're inalienable, they cannot be legitimately taken away. I look at that and I think about how this framework works and I think, this is fantastic. This really is beautiful. I love what we've just described here. We should try that in this country. Woo! Yeah. This would work. And I'm not even joking. This would work. And before I go 1 second further, waxing poetic about how beautiful the Constitution is, time out. Somebody tell me in what year the Constitution is either drafted in secret convention or ratified and made the supreme law of the land. Either date.
1789.
Nicely done, Orville. 1789 is the date. The reason that I put 1789 as the date that this profound document is come into existence to create the United States of America that is supposed to operate the way I've just described. Now, here's the next question. Many of you already know what this next question is going to be. And that is, in 1789, what does legal personhood mean? The ability to assert rights. So, what kind of people had the ability to assert rights? Male landowners. White. So, you had to be a man. If you're not a man, literally you're not legally a person. You have to have a penis or you're not a person. Second, you have to be a landowner. If you don't have property, if you're not actually a person with some degree of wealth, you literally cannot be a person. And, of course, you have to be white. So if you're not a white person, you're actually not legally a person at all. So another way to ask this question is, what percentage of the adult population living in those 13 colonies were actually legally persons? I'm not trying to trick you with children, like of the adults only. What percentage of the adults living here were actually legally persons?
3%.
10%?
2%.
2%? Just 2%? Don't be so cynical. It was 5%. It was maybe 7%, tops. So, of course, another way to say this is 93 to 95% of the human beings living in the United States when this country was formed were not legally persons. Another way to say that, of course, is that the founding of this country, for all the beautiful rhetoric, and it is beautiful rhetoric, the founding of this country, for all the profound ideas that are inherent in how we're taught that it's supposed to work, and it is beautiful, it was actually a founding violence against most of the human beings who were living here. I mean, it's clearly a founding violence against the indigenous human beings who already lived here and were subject to intentional, deliberate genocide. And we need to say that out loud. And I don't mean to say it out of some kind of stupid white liberal guilt about it. I say it because I believe the words of Nelson Mandela when he said the only way to create justice is to create a truth and reconciliation process about injustice. Right? If we're not able to tell the truth about what happened, how in the world can we collectively move forward? See, I'm not interested in guilt. I'm not interested in shame. I'm keenly interested in justice. And in order to create justice collectively, we've got to come to terms with that guilt because there is a psychic violence that's resounding to this day. And frankly, let's be clear, the founding of this country is not just a founding violence against indigenous people. It's also a founding violence against the Africans who were brought at the barrel of a gun or the point of a spear and forced to build this country as enslaved human beings. This country was built by slave labor, and we need to tell that truth. Frankly, white people have to tell that truth. Yes. Right? White people have got to talk about the inherent racism associated with the slavery that built this country. Barack Obama is living in a White House that was built by enslaved Africans. That's the truth. That's right. And there are repercussions to that, psychologically, emotionally, even spiritually. Now, it's also, this founding of this country is a founding violence against women. Because it's not just that women couldn't vote in 1789. Women couldn't even own property. Women were property. By any reasonable understanding of that word, their entire legal relationship was only a function of the men in their lives. They couldn't vote. They couldn't own property. They could not even enter into legal contracts. Do you know why? Because the court said women are like children. They don't have the capacity to bind themselves or make legally binding documents at all.